Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to today's panel discussion. The theme for today's event is Yoga for Climate Action. We have a very eminent panel with us today. I would like to initially kind of introduce each one of them to you. We have Shri Gaur Gopal Das ji, who has come from India. We have Eddie Stern, who's New York-based. He's a teacher and an author. He's a yoga teacher and author. Eddie? All right, thanks. We have Acharya Sreenivasan, who's right towards my right end. And he's a senior disciple of Swami Vishnudevananda. I will introduce each one of them separately. And just next to me is Simon Haas, who is again an author, as well as somebody who spent a very long time in India practicing yoga, and Madam Kusumita Pedersen, who is the Professor Emerita of Religious Studies. To put the event into context, you've seen that yesterday we had to move our event, which was slated to be in the North Lawns, into the GA, which puts into context the whole event, that today climate matters to all of us. It is linked to not only our lifestyles, but it is somehow linked to the consumerism that we are seeing in the world. Whether it calls for restraint or whether it calls for action is for us as residents of this planet to decide. So to kind of introduce you today, we have with us Shri Gaur Gopal Das, who is a lifestyle coach, a motivational speaker. Gaur Gopal Das ji, in his former avatar, was an electrical engineer and had a brief stint with Hewlett-Packard. After a very short period, he decided to upgrade his career to be a life coach. Today, he has over 4 million followers on Facebook, over 1 million on Instagram, and over 2 million subscribers on YouTube. And he's well known globally as an online monk. His debut book, The Life's Amazing Secrets, is an Indian national bestseller. Based on the timeless wisdom coming down from ages, his talks make the audience think deeper and find simple solutions to difficult problems. Before I invite him to deliver his speech, I would like to play a small video.
An electrical engineer by qualification, a motivational speaker by passion, a coach, guide, and mentor by inspiration, a social media sensation, a philanthropist by compassion, an author on a mission. Let's welcome the urban online monk, Gaur Gopal Das.
ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरोन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी Paschatya Deshatarine. A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great privilege, pleasure, and honor to be here this morning for the 5th celebrations of the International Yoga Day. I would like to express my sincerest and deepest gratitude to the Permanent Mission of India and the Permanent Representative of India, Ambassador Shri Akbaruddin ji. My particular thanks to Mr. Nagaraj Naidu, who took it further by inviting me to be here at this event. My gratitude to all the diplomats and ambassadors who are present here this morning. And sincere gratitude to all the yoga masters, the yoga practitioners, the yoga teachers, the yoga supporters, the yoga enthusiasts who are present here for the celebration of the 5th International Yoga Day. Yoga is an incredible science that helps us transform our physical fitness, which is what it's largely known for today. But beyond even physical fitness, it's that science which can help us enhance our mental wellness. But I think even beyond mental wellness, yoga is a science that facilitates the deepening of our spiritual awakening. But to be honest, more than physical fitness, more than mental wellness, more than a spiritual awakening, yoga is a tradition, a culture, a set of values, a set of beliefs that can truly help us deal with much larger issues in the world than fitness. May it be climate change, or may it be issues that are being tackled by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations: poverty, hunger, gender equality, education, life on land, life underwater. Whatever these sustainable goals may be, yoga has a solution, a proposed solution to deal with these larger problems and challenges that the entire world confronts today. I know that as soon as we hear the word yoga as a solution for global issues, we are skeptical. How can a system of exercise, how can a system of breathing be a solution to global issues and problems? Which is why I very strongly and firmly believe that we have to start thinking about yoga as more than exercise. We have to start thinking about yoga as dimensions which has the tenets to offer us solutions to our global problems. This morning I thought I would present to you 3 dimensions of yoga that can truly help us deal with climate change and address the issues that the UN is trying to address through the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. The first dimension is the philosophy of yoga. When we talk about the philosophy of yoga, amongst many other principles, talks about sensitivity, being extremely sensitive to the needs, the interests, the concerns, the feelings, not simply of human beings, but of trees and plants, of animals and birds, of the air and water bodies, of nature, of Mother Earth, of life at large. The philosophy of yoga teaches us the very fundamental premise that can help us change global problems: sensitivity and empathy. I come from India, and I grew up always listening to my mom telling me, oh, we should go and bathe in the Mother Ganges. I wondered, I had a mother already, my mom. Why bathe in Mother Ganges? I constantly kept hearing my mom refer to the earth as Mother Earth. I said, I already have a mom. So here we have Mother Ganges, and now we have, which is a river, and then I have Mother Earth. And then I constantly kept hearing my mom telling me, you should respect and care for Mother Cow. I said, God, I think I have too many moms here. Apart from the mother, the biological mother that gave me birth, here's a Mother Earth, here's Mother Ganges, here's Mother Cow. And what's Mother Ganges? A body of water, river. What's Mother Earth? A planet. Imagine a culture of yoga, a tradition of yoga, where you are even taught to deal with inanimate objects like water bodies and just a planet as people, as personalities. Call it myth, call it reality, I don't care. Call it myth or call it a reality. It's not a problem. But the reality is that here is an attitude where we are trying to treat even inanimate things as people, with dignity, with respect, with honor. And we can well imagine if we can treat inanimate stuff with respect and dignity, what to speak of where there is life, what to speak of trees and plants and birds and animals and polar bears and aquatics, and what to speak of human beings, what to speak of a kid in Somalia, what to speak of someone in Siberia, what to speak of sanitation issues in India. We are talking about a philosophy that teaches sensitivity. I mean, they say that things are meant to be used and people are meant to be loved. In the world today, things are loved and people are used to get those things. Not just people. Trees are used to get those things. Not just trees. Animals are used to get those things. Not just animals. Water bodies are used to get those things. We live in a world where we are constantly exploiting the resources that nature has provided us simply so that we can have those things for our mass consumerism. And we talk about climate change, don't we? And which is why the philosophy of yoga is a philosophy that influences thought. Don't they say, watch your thoughts. They turn into words. Watch your words. They turn into actions. Watch your actions. They turn into a habit. Watch your habits. They turn into a character. Watch your character. It turns into a destiny. We are at a situation where are we meant to be destined with about 8 billion tons of plastic in the oceans? Are we meant to be destined with so many species that are suffering extinction? Who's meant to change it? Unless we change thinking, we can't change speaking. If we can't change speaking, we can't change acting. If we can't change acting, we can't change conditioning. If we can't change conditioning, we can't change characters. And if we can't change characters, we can't change the modern scenario. Which is precisely why it all begins with a thought in there. So apart from physical exercise and pranayama and breathing, yoga is a philosophy that teaches us the fundamental premise of sensitivity. And imagine if we can spread this awareness. Imagine if we can incorporate the philosophy of yoga, which teaches sensitivity, beyond any religion or region, beyond any sect or faith, beyond any caste or culture or creed. Imagine if it's a part of the curriculum all over the globe where we actually teach people how to deal with every aspect of life, including inanimate things, sensitively. We probably are then looking at reversing, if not reversing, improving the current scenario that we face. The second dimension of yoga that I wanted to present to you was about the practice of yoga. The practice of yoga is not just some physical postures called asanas. And the practice of yoga is not just some breathing techniques called pranayama, which is what it is largely known for. One of the practices of yoga that is very crucial in dealing with the global social issues that we are confronted with is self-control. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no question of dealing with these challenges unless we learn the art of self-control. How many of you here have eaten something when your mind wanted it? Thank you very much. How many of you here have said something to someone when your just mind wanted it? Thank you. How many of you have walked into a shopping mall or into a branded store to buy something when your mind said it? I think we live in a world where we have all become, excuse my jargon, servants and slaves to our mind. What if we learn to reverse the situation and rather than being slaves to the mind, learn to be masters to the mind, where rather than the mind being in our control, we are in control of our minds. The pathetic state of the world that we are in today, however, is because, like Mahatma Gandhi said, there is enough in the world for everybody's need, but there's not enough for one man's greed. It's lack of self-control that makes people greedy. It's lack of self-control that makes us consumers. Consuming at the cost of all of those resources that nature provided us so that we can sustainably live and create a legacy of sustainability for the future generations. Unfortunately for us, however, we don't look at it that way. Consumption is not a problem. We need to live in the world, we need to consume. But should that consumption be at the cost of everything that provides us and everything that gives us? And which is why I do believe that when we are slaves and servants to the mind, we are consumers. But when we are masters to our mind, we are contributors. One of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is responsible production and consumption. Be responsible in consuming and be responsible in producing. How are we going to be responsible in consuming and responsible in producing? The practice of yoga teaches us the art of self-control. And which is why I always say that look at the mind carefully before we find external solutions. We need to look at internal solutions of being in control. Most places where I go, there's a lot of discussion on these subjects, but the kind of consumption that happens by the same people who talk about it, unfortunately, is something that can be alarming. And the last dimension of yoga that I wanted to mention about is a process. Yoga is a process that goes even beyond the mind to connect to your very essence, to your very self, and to connect to the divine and to divinity. And that spiritual dimension of yoga can lead to a very powerful contribution. That's called selflessness. The process of yoga, spiritual purification, leads to selflessness. How many of you love ice cream? Okay, thank you. Those who are not raising their hands, they expect me to believe them, isn't it? Yes. But there's a problem with ice cream there. It's fantastic to taste ice cream. The issue with ice cream is its ideology. The ideology behind the ice cream is enjoy it before it melts. And the thing is, life is such as well. It melts away. And people who believe in the ideology of the ice cream say, enjoy your life before it melts. A very selfish ideology. Narcissistic and self-absorbed. Contrast that with the candle. What is the ideology behind the candle? Give light to others before it melts. An ice cream melts and a candle melts. But an ice cream is all about narcissistic self-absorption, and a candle is about selfless contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there is a time, it is time now, that we need to help ourselves and people slowly make that shift from being an ice cream to a candle. The more we stop living as an ice cream, and the more we start living as a candle, we will think about the ocean, we'll think about the polar bear, we'll think about some little girl in Syria, we will think about someone out there, because we are not self-absorbed, we are trying to be a candle to look at how we can offer a solution to these issues. You know something? The first letter of the word illness is I. And the first two letters of the word wellness are W and E, which is we. And it's quite fantastic that when we move from I to we, illness turns into wellness. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very easy to make a buck, difficult to make a difference, but together we can all indeed make a difference in our way, in our tiny bit, step by step, and contribute towards dealing with the issues of climate change and other issues that the world confronts today. And yoga can be such a massive step towards it. The philosophy of yoga teaching us sensitivity, the practice of yoga teaching us self-control, and the process of yoga, bringing us to selflessness. The 3 Ps leading through the 3 S's. When we connect them all, that's yoga for climate change. Once again, thank you all very much for your kind listening.
Thank you, Swamiji, for putting today's event into context. Before I invite my next speakers to kind of give their initial remarks for about length of 5 minutes each, I would like to call upon the next speaker. The next speaker would be Acharya Sreenivasan. He's a senior disciple of Swami Vishnu Devananda. I think we have a small video on him. Can you please put it out, please?
Namaste. My name is Srinivasan, and I'm the Acharya of the Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Centers here in New York. And it's my great honor to be here at the United Nations and to be sitting on this panel for yoga and peace.
Yoga is an ancient, universal science of peace. It was my great good fortune to take my first Sivananda yoga class in 1970. During the first Earth Day, at a time when I was under tremendous stress, arriving at draft age and making a case as a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. Yoga became my means of finding inner peace, gave me my first lessons in Ahimsa, or nonviolence, and introduced me to the teachings of tolerance and oneness, the philosophy of unity and diversity. My teacher, Swami Vishnu Devananda, the guru and founder of the International Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Centers, developed the first yoga teacher training course in 1969 as a vehicle to train a new generation of leaders in peace. Swamiji taught by example, supreme courage and humility in the face of conflict, violence, and oppression. Yoga teaches that peace is not only possible, it is essential for human survival. United we stand, divided we perish. The International Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Centers has trained nearly 50,000 yoga teachers and created a working model for teacher training that, going viral, has set off a worldwide cultural shift to yoga as an essential discipline of health and inner peace. I have witnessed thousands of yoga teachers in training pass through personal transformation, developing practical yoga and peace skills.
Again, it's my great honor to be here, and I look forward to seeing you all. Namaste.
Professor. Acharya Sreenivasan, I would now request you to kind of put the event into you can sit, you can use the microphone on your. Thank you so much.
Is it on or? Okay. So, yoga, very, very well put in the essence of yoga practice, but yoga is experiential from the very beginning. And when people start to take responsibility for their health, then we start looking at life differently. And the yoga classes now have become, people can go almost anywhere and take a yoga class. And whether the philosophy is there or not, when people start to relax and to breathe in a conscious way and to find their balance in their posture, then there's a switch that takes place. My first yoga class, I think, was the first time I experienced relaxation. And when you have that experience, and you want to come back to it. And the philosophy is all there if people want to go deeper into it. And if you approach service as also a practice of yoga, and really looking at the world as our body. When we start thinking in terms of health, there's just a basic question between what is good and what is pleasant. This is the essential question that yoga demands that each person ask of themselves. Each decision that we make, are we making it? Is it a healthy decision, or is it the ice cream decision, as you mentioned? And this is universal, and everyone, whatever approach you come, if you come to the asana, this gives you that experience which you can go deeper into. And when you start feeling where your center is with the breath, with your balance, with relaxation, and then meditation itself is experiencing happiness outside of objects. And even if you're not practicing meditation formally, the yoga asanas become a meditation if you are practicing them in a group situation. And group classes actually are a satsang, where people are relaxing together, where they're learning to breathe in a rhythmic, in a relaxed way together. And it is something which can be shared and experienced in a general way, not just an individual way. So in a world which is out of balance, and we can all see in terms of all the problems that the UN is dealing with, and we have the answers, but the question is, can there be a paradigm shift? And that paradigm shift can happen when we start seeing that health is happiness, and that balance is happiness, and that living in nature in a way where we're honoring life as sacred, where we're honoring each other as sacred, then the paradigm shifts. And then it's, instead of what's in it for me, it becomes let me appreciate life, and let me see how taking care of others is also brings me happiness. And it's not something that's a theory, it's something that's experiential. And once you take a step in karma yoga or selfless service, once you take a step in asana and pranayama, you have that experience. Once you start practicing meditation, that experience is there, and it is something which people share with each other. So yoga is not just something we practice for ourselves, even though it's an individual practice, it's something that, because we find our own peace, our own health with the practice, it's something that we want to share with others. And what our organization with the Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Center is really focused on disseminating this knowledge of yoga, and by training yoga teachers. And as again, yoga, we see the transformation in the students as they come and do yoga teachers training courses. And then by the end of the course, usually we start at the beginning of the course, we ask, what is your intention for the course? And most people want to do something positive in the world. But this really, yoga gives people the opportunity to really experience what is possible and see that change in their own lives, and then bring that change to others in whatever way that you approach yoga. That approach is there to learn how to serve, learn how to give, learn how to purify and find health in your own life, learn how to meditate and to realize the oneness of life and the sacredness of life. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Acharya. I would now request the next speaker, Professor Kusumita Pedersen, who is a Professor Emerita of Religious Studies at St. Francis College, New York, and has been part of the global interfaith movement for over the last 30 years. She was previously Executive Director of the Project of Religion and Human Rights, and currently serves as the co-chair of the Interfaith Center of New York. She's also been a co-editor of Earth and Faith, a book of reflection for action, which has been published by the UNEP, and the co-author of The Practices of Global Ethics. Madam, can we have your intervention, please?
Thank you so much. And I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions and a co-founder of the Climate Action Task Force of the Parliament. I'll offer brief ethical reflections and then 4 examples of climate action by different yoga groups. And please forgive me because of the shortness of time. Only 4 examples, and I'm sure that from those assembled we will learn more about the climate action that you're engaged in. The philosophies that frame yoga affirm the unity of existence and hold that all living beings are interrelated as they share an inner nature which is their real nature. This is called the jiva, the Buddha nature, or the soul or self, the Atman, and has divine attributes of consciousness and bliss. It goes from birth to birth, assuming different bodily forms according to its karma or action and result. In this worldview, there is no question about the value of nature because everything has a soul. And in theistic language, referring to God, the divine is in everything. As my own spiritual teacher, Sri Chinmoy, has said, in his transcendental aspect, God is the Lord of nature. In his universal aspect, God is nature itself. The practice of meditation makes it possible for us to perceive the oneness of all existence and experience the divine presence in nature. When we realize the unity of all existence, this knowledge leads naturally to love for all beings and compassion. This ethics is widely accepted across the different yoga traditions. And if one has love for all beings and wishes them to be well and happy, climate change becomes an immense problem, as it threatens the well-being of countless lives on a massive scale. The first ethical norm of yoga in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is Ahimsa, or non-harming. It is an indispensable foundation for the practitioners of yoga. And Ahimsa means not harming human beings only by action, word, or even in thought. It also refers to all other than human living beings. It also means not tolerating or standing by when harm is being done or is likely to be done. Harm should be stopped if it's underway and also should be proactively prevented. Harm to individual beings is, of course, prohibited, but since damage to ecosystems or habitats will bring harm to many individuals, this also must be avoided. As well, the imperative of nonviolence or non-harming and love extends to beings yet to be born, to future generations of human and also non-human beings. So given the vast harmful impact of climate change, commitment to non-harming means that climate action is absolutely something that we must do. The second ethical norm or yama in Patanjali is satya, or truth. And this means not we must only tell the truth, but we must seek the truth and pursue the truth, and we must not turn away from truth. And in this case, the reality of climate change. By ignoring climate change, tolerating the falsehoods of others, or worst of all, communicating falsehoods about what is actually happening. The next 2 norms of asteya, or non-stealing, and brahmacharya, right regulation of the life energy, also are clearly applicable to climate change. We should not privilege ourselves in having resources or security that is denied to others. We should not steal the future from those yet to come after us. And regulation of life energy has everything to do with engaging consumption and even the global population issue. And finally, the 5th yama is aparigraha, or non-possession and non-possessiveness. Again, this engages directly with the issues of greed and consumption, but I would also venture that it means that we should not make money and so-called economic considerations the primary or dominant factor in making decisions. This thinking, and now going to my 4 examples, all of this thinking is now widespread among yoga groups. And the movement called Green Yoga has worked to develop this environmental interpretation of yoga and through study, dialogue, and has published the values statement of the Green Yoga Association based in California. And attention has also been given to not just to philosophy and ethics, but to the actual practices within yoga studios and centers, and the materials that are used. And we need to mention, of course, vegetarianism and veganism, always held up whenever there are recommendations about how to prevent and mitigate climate change. Eat lower on the food chain. At the Satchidananda Ashram in Yogaville, Virginia, founded in 1980, disciples of Swami Satchidananda carry forward the YES, or Yogaville Environmental Solutions Initiative, putting their facilities on solar energy, achieving a certification from Green Faith, practicing vegetarianism, and following in general the teaching of Swami Satchidananda of love for all beings and our duty towards nature. They have also formed an interfaith environmental justice coalition with African American churches and other faith communities to forcefully and expertly oppose the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which is a 600-mile and $7.5 billion natural gas pipeline routed largely through communities of people of color. And it would place a gas compressor in Union Hill adjacent to the ashram with destructive effects on well water, biodiversity, forests, and the agricultural land of those who have lived there for many generations. This is a stellar example of the expression of the ethics and practice of yoga in climate action. And Swami, it is one of their leaders is Swami Dayananda, and I'm sure some of you here know her. In Tamil Nadu, South India, the Isha Foundation was founded by Satguru Jaggi Vasudev, who spoke in this very program, perhaps in this very room, here at the UN a few years ago. And Isha Outreach in 2004 began Project Green Hands, which with 2 million volunteers has now planted 35 million saplings. Its website states, our vision to inspire people to plant trees, develop a culture of care towards the environment, and reestablish their connection with nature. Our mission to increase the green cover of Tamil Nadu by 10% in order to reverse desertification, reduce soil erosion, restore self-sufficiency, recreate sustainability, and survive climate change. And they are aiming to plant 114 million trees in the shortest span of time possible. And finally, the Govardhan Eco Village in the mountains of Maharashtra, which you know very well, north of Mumbai, is a 100-acre spiritual community of practitioners of bhakti yoga, or the yoga of devotion. And it has an array of scientifically expert, leading-edge environmental programs aiming at the welfare of all beings. Its founder is Radhanath Swami, a revered teacher in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, deeply rooted in the age-old ecocentric theology and ethics of the Vaishnava tradition. And the climate-related programs of the Govardhan Eco Village include solar energy, energy conservation, building construction that reduces the carbon footprint, and sustainable agriculture. And it should be mentioned that this is not the only eco-village of the Hare Krishna movement, but that all of its temples, centers, and restaurants are molded and inspired by this earth-honoring and climate-engaged philosophy. And as Sri Krishna has said in the Bhagavad Gita, we must act for the welfare of the world to maintain the right order of the world. And he says, yoga is skill in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your remarks. I would now request Eddie Stern, who is a yoga instructor, raised in New York City. He studied Ashtanga Yoga, chanting, philosophy, and ritual under Sri K. Patabi Joyce from Mysore. And he's the founder of the Broome Street Ganesha Temple in New York City. He co-publishes Nam Rupa, Categories of Indian Thought, a Hindu art and philosophy magazine, runs the Urban Yogis project that brings yoga and meditation to young adults and youth in disadvantaged and at-risk to violence communities in New York City with his collaborator, Deepak Chopra. He has published several books on Patabi Joyce and Ashtanga Yoga, including a translation of Patabi Joyce's 1960 treatise, the Yoga Mala. And he himself is an author, and he continues to study with Patabi Joyce's grandson and successor, Sharad Joyce. Eddie, please.
Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Thank you very much, Mr. Naidu. Salutations to the Mahatmas who are with us today. It's an honor to be in your presence. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, it says, when the student is entering into the presence of those wise ones, they should keep completely, utterly silent. So it is only with your blessings that I will begin to speak today. Salutations as well to the permanent mission of India to New York and to all of the countries of the world. To Mr. Naidu and Mr. Muhammad, who have organized so well today. It is an honor to be here with all of you. And as well to all of the presenters on this panel, it is an honor to sit with you too. Following along with Ms. Pedersen's examples of very enlightened engagement with the environment, I'd like to carry on with the idea which is presented in yoga of the three bodies. It's considered in the yoga tradition, this is again spoken of in the Taittiriya Upanishad and others, that we have three bodies made of five sheaths. And our first body is the physical body, the one that we can see. And then we have a subtle body made of things we can't see. And these are our breath and our mind and the intellect. And then further, a third body, which is called the Karana Sharira, also known as the body of joy or bliss, and where all of the causative actions of our life are contained. Now, the physical body, which is the main thing we see manipulated in the yoga practices with asanas and such things, brings to people who practice it a new awareness of their body. And one of the primary things which can begin to connect us through this idea of using the body in spiritual practice to climate change and to respect for the earth is the idea that although we have a physical body that we consider to be our own, we also have an extended physical body, and that is the earth and the planet that we live in. So that the rivers that are flowing on this planet are our blood, and the trees are our lungs, and the ground that we walk upon are our bones, the supporting mechanisms of the body. So that in the air that we breathe, in the sunshine, in every single aspect of this planet and in this biosphere that we live in, which is circulating energy and circulating and sustaining our lives, is inseparable from our own physical body. There is a non-distinction between the environment we live in and the body that we inhabit. And it's only through the through false perception that we see that our body is separate from the environment. So one of the things that yoga begins to do for people is it begins to shift perception. So how do we begin to shift our perception? Well, number one, we start to do things like asanas. And when we do the asanas, there are so many different asanas that are representative of the different animals on the earth, different trees and mountains and life forms, the rishis and the sages, the geometric forms, and we imitate these shapes with our body. And through imitating these forms, our perspective begins to shift a little, so that we start to see the world maybe through the eyes of a turtle, or maybe through the eyes of a rooster, maybe through the eyes of a tree, maybe through the eyes of the wind. And through that, the experience of our body expands to not just me as a human being, individual, separate from everyone else, but that I begin to feel this likeness with other beings in this creation. And why might that be so? Because even though I'm changing the form of my body from one shape to another, the consciousness within, which is my awareness of the changing forms, does not change. So even though the shape is changing, awareness doesn't change. And in that non-changing contact with awareness is this recognition of sameness with all other life forms. And then our circle begins to expand. So in the Dharma Shastras, it says, Sharira Madhyam Kalu Dharma Sadhanam, which means that our body is our first duty. The first thing we need to maintain in our life is our body. And when we begin to express this self-care for the body, it naturally begins to extend through this shift of perspective to the body of the world that we live in. So this is the first thing about the postures, why they're so important and why so many people are drawn to them. Because really what we crave as human beings is we crave connection, we crave the expansion of consciousness, and we crave to know who we are, what is meaning in our life, and what is our purpose here. And in that craving, we're drawn to something like yoga, meditation, or maybe something like Tai Chi or Qigong. And inherent in these practices is a transformation of our limited consciousness to something which is more expansive. And so with that, I have just a tremendous, tremendous gratitude for the yogis and the yoginis and the rishis and the sages who have passed on these teachings of yoga for so many thousands of years so that we can experience them here in New York City, which is a megapolis filled with stress and pollution and so many other things, that we can have this glimmer of what is our potential and how can we really change ourselves and help to participate in the conversation and the action of changing things in the world. So I want to say one other thing about that, if I may. Number one, when it comes to beginning to work with our changing states of awareness or mental states within yoga, we have something which could be called a bottom-up approach to self-transformation. So a top-down approach would be you start with the prefrontal cortex with meditation. That leads to changes in the neural networks, which leads to emotional changes, which leads to different changes in the physiological functioning. So in yoga, what we're doing is we're starting with asanas and pranayama in a bottom-up approach. So we start to do things that are going to control the functions that keep us alive that we're not aware of, such as our breathing, our nervous system, our heart rate, digestion, sexual reproduction, sleep, all of the things that we don't have to think about that keep us alive. The yogis somehow knew that if we begin to work with these autonomic functions, we can access higher states of transcendence or higher states of integration in being. So for example, if through my survival functions, I am tied into this idea of breathing. So much so that if my breathing stops even for a few minutes, not even a few minutes, a few seconds, the body responds and says, no, you have to keep breathing. And so I'm tied again to that process to begin again. So what happens if for a few minutes every day, I willfully slow my breathing down, or maybe stop the breathing for a few minutes every day? That connection that my consciousness has with the survival functions becomes separated for a moment. And then I can say, well, who am I if I'm not bound to my breath? And who am I if I'm not bound to eating for a little while through controlling my diet? Who am I if I'm not bound to sleep for a little while? And then this being fixed and stuck in the survival functions, we create some space. And in that space, we move out from things like, say, fear of death or fear of separation. And most importantly, we begin to weaken this perception we have that everything around us is threatening to our existence. So when we're tied to our survival mechanisms, we begin to see things around us as threats which are not threatening. And this is what the sympathetic nervous system does. It likes to perceive threat everywhere where there might not be some. So when we begin to consciously down-regulate this idea that things are threatening, that the world is out to get us, to shifting to feeling, actually, I'm content, I'm safe, I'm integrated, then we cease to cause harm to other things outside us, like our extended body, like the world. We think about our consumption. We think about use of plastic. We think about the food we eat. We think about the consumer materials that we use, because We don't need these things to maintain our existence. And then the aparigraha, or the greed that Ms. Pedersen was talking about, naturally begins to settle down. The contentment that Gaur Gopal spoke about naturally begins to increase because things are not a threat. And when things are not a threat, we're safe within ourselves and we're connected to the people around us. And so the last thing I'll say on this is that when we begin to experience this, that the world is not a threat because we are integrated into the world and non-distinct from it, then we gain conviction that what we're doing is bringing us in the right direction. And this is called shraddha, or faith or conviction, that what we're doing is leading us in the right direction. And then, as Patanjali says, this leads us to virya, which is vitality or energy, and gives us the enthusiasm to continue on this path, to keep going. So we go from shraddha to virya to smriti, to memory. And we start to remember, who am I? What is my meaning? What's important to me? And also to remember to continue moving forward on this path. And the memory leads to samadhi, which is deep levels of concentration that leads us to prajna, or insight, or intuition into who we truly are. And so shraddha, virya, smriti, samadhi, prajna, purvaka, iteration. It's a closed feedback loop. That insight brings me back to conviction that I'm moving in the right direction. And that will continue to keep me connected, engaged in the world, to treat the world not only as my mother, but as my own body. In the same way I take care of my body, I will take care of the world and all of the people and beings in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much. We now have our speaker, Simon Haas. Simon is an internationally renowned author and a teacher of yoga philosophy. We have a small video which will kind of introduce you to him.
Simon Haas is an internationally renowned author and teacher of yoga philosophy. He specializes in applying yoga wisdom to everyday life, especially in the fields of leadership and decision-making. From the age of 13, Simon began studying the Upanishads and other sacred writings of India. He spent 10 years living in temple monasteries in India, immersing himself in the teachings of yoga. This is where Simon met his teacher, Sri Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami, an elderly master practitioner in the Bhakti tradition. Simon now focuses on making the wisdom of yoga accessible to contemporary readers and audiences. He is the author of the bestseller, The Book of Dharma, Making Enlightened Choices, published in 5 languages. His most recent book is Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul. All profits from Simon's work support registered non-profit causes, including Food for Life Vrindavan, which provides free education, healthcare, and meals to over 1,500 children in need, especially girls, in rural Uttar Pradesh, India. Food for Life Vrindavan also focuses resources on tree planting and environmental cleaning. The Earth is a small, fragile planet. Its wildlife is dying. Its forests are dwindling. Its climate is changing. Never has there been a need as pressing as now, both locally and globally, for outstanding leadership to help resolve the world's most difficult challenges. The teachings of yoga provide a set of tools for empowered leadership and decision-making. They also call upon each of us, as practitioners, to live responsibly and to take action to help reverse the damage we have already caused. If the world's 300 million yoga practitioners were to unite in taking this global issue seriously, we might be able to say in the years to come, yoga led the way.
Simon?
Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Jayataha. Good morning. It's an honor to be here today as your servant to focus on one of the most pressing issues of our times, climate change. To help resolve the world's most difficult challenges, we need outstanding leadership. In ancient India, the rishis or sages understood that the quality of a leader's decision-making is paramount. It determines the future of generations. They therefore devised a system for making wise decisions, called the Dharma Code. The Dharma Code is a set of 4 yoga principles: truth, purity, non-violence, and discipline. Yoga practitioners will recognize those principles immediately. They are yamas and niyamas, or habits of excellence, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. These 4 are especially important for decision-making. When we apply these 4 principles in our life simultaneously, the Bhagavad Purana explains, we invoke something far greater than we are, something known as dharma. Dharma, as you know, comes from dri, which means to uphold or to sustain. This is when our thoughts, words, and actions are of such quality that the universe supports our efforts. We are aligned with the hidden laws of life, the laws that govern sustainability and human excellence. Truth, purity, non-violence, and discipline are universal principles. They do not belong to any nation or tradition. They belong to all nations and all traditions. And indeed, we find them in all civilizations and cultures of the world. Each of these 4 principles is itself a sutra. The Sanskrit sutra means tip of a thread. Maybe to better explain, let me use a more contemporary analogy. You've probably all had the frustrating experience of trying to find the end of a roll of Scotch tape, right? You roll your fingernail across the roll, you raise it to the light, looking for the starting point. If you can find the starting point, you can unroll the Scotch tape and use it for whatever it is you want. So in the ancient world, Scotch tape didn't exist. So the Rishis used the analogy of a spool of thread. If you can locate the tip of the thread, you can unroll the entire spool. And you may discover that the thread you hold extends for many hundreds of yards. So truth, purity, non-violence, and discipline are each like the tip of a thread. The rishis or sages have given us some indication of what these principles are as a starting point. But then it is up to us in our own life to unroll these spools through our own practice and to discover where it leads us. I have found that the more we apply these principles in our everyday life, the deeper our understanding and our appreciation of them becomes. We will look briefly, very briefly, at truth and nonviolence in relation to climate action. Of the 4 principles of Dharma, nonviolence is the most important. That's why it's the first yama in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. To understand nonviolence, it helps to look carefully at the various ways in which we can be violent in our life. We can be violent to others, we can be violent to ourselves and to the earth. Actually, whenever we're violent to the earth, we're simultaneously also violent to others, which includes non-human life forms, and to ourselves. In that sense, aggression to the earth is the greatest form of violence. Now, there's one in the ancient Atharva Veda. We find what is maybe the oldest environmental text, known as the Prithvi Sukta. The Prithvi Sukta, or hymn to the earth, refers to the earth as Mata Bhumi, Mother Earth. In one poignant verse, the hymn to the earth exhorts, Mate marma vimrigvari, Mate hridayam arpipam, O purifying earth, let me not pierce your vital points or your heart. Now, as you know, through climate change caused by humans, we have already killed off half the world's coral reefs. We are now causing the Earth's 6th mass extinction event. We are increasing the frequency and destructive force of hurricanes and droughts. Within our lifetime, we will have submerged entire islands and coastal regions in the rising sea, whilst rendering large parts of the Earth near the equator uninhabitable. No one is isolated from this impending catastrophe. It affects us all. We call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens, wise humans. But how wise can we really say we are? So truth, the second principle of the Dharma code and the second yama, is about not ignoring reality, but about perceiving things and saying things as they are, no matter how uncomfortable that may sometimes be. When I listen to Greta Thunberg speaking on climate action, her words are startling. They enter the heart like arrows of truth. When we were youngsters, we mostly said things just as we saw them, without compromise. Our simple observations were unaffected and unbribable. In the words of Emerson, they sank like darts into the ears of men and put them in fear. But as we grew up, we began neglecting truth. Our words stopped matching our thoughts. Why are truthful words so potent? Because when we speak truth, the universe speaks through us. As Mahatma Gandhi observed, I may be a despicable person, but when truth speaks through me, I am invincible. Truth is about maintaining integrity or accord between what we think, what we say, and what we do. One ancient text, the Hitopadesh, defines a Mahatma or a great soul. It says, the small-minded person thinks in one way, speaks in another, and acts still differently. But the great soul, the Mahatma, says what he thinks and does what he says. You all know about Mahatma Gandhi. He was an elderly man with few possessions, just a few simple pieces of hand-woven cloth known as a dhoti. His only weapons were truth and non-violence. He called his movement satyagraha, holding on to truth, and he embraced the principle of ahimsa or non-violence. Through the principles of the Dharma code, he was able to overcome the largest colonial empire of the time. Over the years, many have drawn inspiration from Gandhi, such as Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. They too achieved the seemingly impossible. How? Through the power of truth and non-violence. To reverse climate change, we too must now achieve the seemingly impossible. The time has come to abandon our narrative of powerlessness. We can make a difference. The time has come to rebuild our world out of truth and non-violence. I meet yoga practitioners every day from all different countries who are already leading the way on climate action. In ancient India, the birthplace of yoga, wise rulers were known as Bhupal, earth guardians. The earth is the shelter of all life. Therefore, by being responsible caretakers of the earth, we are protecting all species, including our own. Today, yoga asks each of us to become an earth guardian. Namaste.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for those excellent remarks. I'm reminded in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's an ancient Indian text, which is in the form of a conversation between Arjuna, who is the warrior prince, and his guide and charioteer, Krishna. If anybody had read the Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter 3, verse 36, Arjuna asks Krishna, why do we act against our best interests? As if we are compelled by some dark force to destroy ourselves. Krishna's response reveals something of yoga's position with regard to climate change. Krishna says, if we lose sight of ourselves as eternal souls on a sacred journey, we fall prey to selfish cravings. And that can kill both ourselves and the planet. Today, I think I would like to express my gratitude to all the panelists who have come here and have shared their thoughts and examples with us. Before I can open up the session, I thought I would ask them one or two questions. One of the questions which I always thought I would ask that most of the panelists are aware of the Sanskrit mantra, Loka samastha sukhino bhavantu, which means, may all beings everywhere be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. This question is more personal. Can each of you give us any example of how you have contributed to a better world, or perhaps narrate an experience that has transformed your own outlook on life and the need to act sustainably? I would perhaps start with Acharya Sreenivasan, and we could perhaps...
with all humility, no. I look at my connection with Guru, with Swami Vishnudevananda, as greatest gift. I felt a split between spiritual practice, between yoga practice and peace, and to be able to bring the two together and to realize that they're one. This was the life that Swami Vishnudevananda lived. That inner peace and outer peace cannot be separated. That karma yoga is a practice of both Vedanta and devotion, both the yoga philosophy that we've been speaking about and the devotion. And that if you're just working and you're without any focus, then it's like working like a donkey, and donkeys don't get liberation, and without the wisdom of that inner practice and connection with truth, with satya and commitment to integrity of ahimsa and the yamas and the niyamas. Whatever actions we do really are probably going to create more problems than make solutions, which was, when I was in college, I was very much involved with the anti-war movement, and I mean, that was a very good cause, but when you're just fighting against something, we're just fighting against climate change, but we don't really have a sense of appreciation of life, at the sacredness of life, which the inner practice of yoga connects us with, then it's only half. And I think that again, this gift of really having the guidance of Swami Vishnudevananda and serving the mission of really spreading the teachings of yoga as peace and as health and as sustainability. This has been my life, and every time I teach a yoga teacher's training course, which we teach 28-day courses, which are intensive residential courses, and people just immerse themselves in the yoga practice, all the things that you've all been speaking about. I feel like we all are speaking the same language, and the references of the scriptures and of the practice are something which are becoming a universal language of transformation and of healing healing ourselves and healing the planet. So just to be able to be involved in this process of transformation, which becomes my own transformation when I'm teaching and I'm practicing, but it's also the transformation of all the people who are coming and committing themselves to a yoga practice. And also most often when people come for a yoga teacher training course, they have other intentions. They're doing work with youth. They're doing work with all the different types of services that everybody here is committing themselves to. The practice of yoga really gives a focus to that, gives a meaning to that, and gives a connection where it's not just acting individually, but acting with Dharma, which is not just is upholding its sustainability, but it also is a connection with the whole flow of life. And when we work together for peace, when we work together for sustainability, we're practicing Dharma, and it's not about me or you or any of us. It is just acting according to what needs to be done, which is what nature does, and what humans have to learn how to do. And yoga really gives us the tools to learn how to act in a way which is in harmony with life, which is upholding life. So I think that being a part of that has been a contribution, and I really feel honored to be part of that.
Thank you, Acharya. Eddie?
So what do I do?
No, essentially, do you any personal experience that has transformed you, which you felt that, okay, now you've taken to yoga, and how has that contributed to making you kind of change the world or change the circumstances under you for us to have a cleaner, perhaps, of a sustainable world?
Okay. Well, the first transformative experience I had was actually going to a yoga class. And doing Shavasana at the end of the class, I went into the void, and then I came out from the void a changed person. And that's all I've been doing ever since. In terms of what I might do to try to actualize that in the world, I think I just do two things. One, I try to be kind whenever I can remember to be, and I try to listen. And those are the two basic things, I think. If I like to try to listen as closely as I can to people, as a father, as a son, as a teacher, and I try to be kind in all situations. And the lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu, following on what Acharya said also, the preceding parts of this prayer say, Swasti prajabhyaha paripalyantam nyayena margena mahim mahishaha go brahmanebhyaha shubhamastu nityam lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu kale varashati parajanyaha prativim sasyashalinim deshoyam kshubarayto brahmana santu nirbhayaha. So this is really a prayer for may everything fall into the right place. May swasti prajabhyaha, may there be goodness to all beings. Nyayena margena mahim mahishaha. May the leaders or the kings of the earth or the rulers lead us on the good path. So we look to the elders to guide us. I think these days we are really wishing we had some more of that. Go brahmanebhyaha shubhamastu nityam. May there always be goodness to the wise ones and perhaps the sense organs, the goes of the wise ones. And then next, kale varashati parajanyaha. May the rains fall on time. May the crops yield themselves on time in the proper cycles as well. So this goes on to say, may everything fall in the proper place, and may I be aligned within that cycle as well. So may I bring myself into harmony. I had a student whose name was Lou Reed. He was a famous rock musician in America. He passed away a few years ago, and his wife, Laurie Anderson, who's an amazing violin player. And they had these 3 rules for life, which I think are brilliant. Number 1 is don't be afraid of anyone. We all exist equally here, so don't have fear of anyone. Number 2, always have your antennas up for when people are not being exactly straight with you. They called those antennas by a different name, which I will not repeat here in the United Nations. And then the last one was, after always having your antennas up for when people are playing you, the last is be as tender as possible always. And I think those are three beautiful rules, and I try to follow them as well as much as possible. And in that way, I feel that I walk lightly on this planet.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much. Swamiji, please.
Earlier on, when I was talking about the philosophy of yoga being a philosophy of sensitivity to all beings, I had a personal experience when I just joined the monastery about 24 years back. In India, when we joined monasteries, even in our homes, we didn't have laundromats and washing machines. We just had the traditional Indian way of doing our laundry. We would have detergent in water, and we would soak the clothes for about 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, we would rinse them in another bucket of clean water. That was just how we did it. So I came to a monastery, obviously, and we didn't have a laundromat. And up until then, I was 21 when I joined the monastery. Up until then, the laundry was always done by my mom. So here I was now in a monastery, never ever did my laundry, and I'm confronted with this orientation now of learning how to do my laundry. So I learned it. And one day I remember I had to go for an event. I had soaked my clothes in detergent and water for 30 minutes. And then I went to the bathroom, now to rinse them in another bucket of clean water. But being a little lazy of who's going to bend down to pull the bucket under the water faucet, I just kicked the bucket under the tap, under the water faucet. And then I heard a voice of someone from behind me asking me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just filling in water to rinse my clothes." This elderly monk said to me, "Oh, I can see that, but what are you doing?" I said, I'm just rinsing my clothes." He said, "I can see that, but what are you doing?" Being a little shocked at the way he was bringing this up, I said, "What are you hinting to?" He asked me, "Why are you kicking the bucket?" I said, "Look, it's a bucket, not you. Why are you so concerned and why are you so bothered about just a bucket, right?" You know what he told me? He said to me, "It's not about a bucket. It's about an attitude of insensitivity. If you treat your things insensitively, you will end up treating people, nature, the resources on the globe insensitively as well. Start with the smallest things in life, and you will see how that attitude starts percolating in the larger things of life as well." So that experience was transforming to me, that it was a bucket, but it taught me a very important lesson of sensitivity that we were talking about in terms of climate change. And as he was asking about what, on a personal front, what do I do to contribute in dealing with climate change, I would say there's three things I try. It's just a humble attempt, not that I can never claim I do any of those things. The first thing is I try to live a life of conscious consumption. We all have to start living a life of conscious consumption. Today we are living a life of unconscious consumerism, and we have to shift from unconscious consumerism to conscious consumption. And what is conscious consumption all about? Well, I live in India, and I live in a city called Mumbai, which is super humid. The temperatures are anywhere between 32 to about 38 degrees Celsius. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's humid. And when I joined the monastery, God, I came from a city which wasn't like that. And then I was asked to, at a certain point in my 3 meters by 3 meters tiny little room that I live in, I was offered an air conditioner. Start using an air conditioner. Until last year, I did not agree to it. So 23 years, I was living in a 3 meters by 3 meters room, which didn't have an air conditioner, hot, only because I travel a lot now, about 250 flights a year. So which is why I shift time zones like 3 times in a week. And so rest has become of crucial importance. Did we even have an aircon in my room about 6 months back? And after those 6 months, I only turn it on for a few minutes every night, just only in the night, just to make sure that the temperature is a little okay. And then once it's not needed, I turn it off. Ladies and gentlemen, we can talk about climate change a lot, but as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And which is why we need to live by conscious consumption. The second thing that I try to do, in my humble way, is try to spread awareness about conscious living. If we cannot spread awareness and educate people, we're only talking. We have to make this awareness go to every person in the world. And the one thing that takes it to the world today is social media, which is why I have chosen to be an urban online monk. I may be misunderstood, I may be judged in clothes like these. How am I doing this stuff? But it doesn't matter. Recently we made a video on environment, and we spoke about conscious living and conscious consumption so that awareness spreads. So conscious consumption, awareness of conscious living, and the third, which is a proposal that I have, and we are working on it, is conscious production. It's a project that we are looking at in terms of making merchandise, which will be in line with principles of climate change, and then the returns of which, all the merchandise that's sold, the returns of which 100% of it will go for projects that support sustainable development goals. So yes, conscious consumption, conscious living, and conscious production are the things that I personally try to look at in my way of adding value to the world that we live in.
Please, Professor
Well,
Pedersen.
thank you so much for your profound question. And the mantra that you shared is very similar also, of course, to the loving kindness meditation of Buddhism and the Bodhisattva's vow to save all beings. This is, we have to remember that yoga and this love for all beings is not unique to any one tradition. And we have an extraordinary convergence among ourselves on this platform of our values, our gratitude to our teachers, and our aspirations. So you asked about transformation, and I've been thinking as I've been hearing you speak, and I have to say, and that the really transforming experience that formed me for all time came as soon as I was a conscious being in this world and experienced nature and the beauty of nature and my oneness with other beings in nature. And I was very fortunate to be raised in an unspoiled area in Connecticut, not far from here. It's not quite the same today. And to spend the summers in one of the most beautiful places on this planet, which is Mount Desert Island in Maine. And my experience was that the salt water of the ocean, the islands, a stone on the beach, was like a person to me. This experience of oneness and intimacy with the beauty of the natural world is almost the most powerful experience I know. Every mountain was like a human face. And so when I met my spiritual teacher, Sri Chinmoy, who passed away 11 years ago, he led meditations for peace in this building for almost 40 years, beginning in 1970. And the experience of the heart, meditating in the heart, and being at times able to enter into the silence of the heart, but to cultivate the capacity to love, is a way of making this experience of love for the world something that you could constantly go back to. And then knowing the oneness of the divine and the world with all of its beings. And Sri Chinmoy would often refer to God, the creator, and God, the creation. All is the divine. And so we have all been saying love for all beings has to be expressed in service. And it's not about me, but it's about what I can do for others. We finally realize that there isn't a difference. We have to overcome any, we have to overcome the sense of division and express our love and concern for the welfare of all beings through our actions. And the climate crisis is so utterly urgent, as has been said, that we really, the more we can cultivate the capacity to give without reservation, the sooner we are going to get through this planetary crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Simon?
Sometimes an issue like climate change can seem so large that we may wonder what can we do? How can we really contribute in some way? So there are 4 ways, well, there are many ways, but 4 broad ways that are very practical, that any of us can really make a difference. And over the years, I've been focusing on trying to focus on these areas in my own life. And in doing so, I would like to say that I've learned so much from yoga practitioners all over the world. I think many of whom are actually leading the way in environmental practices, sustainability practices, and climate action. So the first is, as has been mentioned already, is how we live our lives. Whether we live a life that is very much based on accumulating more than we need. So the principles of yoga teach us that we won't find happiness by accumulating things. And through the practice of yoga, that becomes a reality. Our perception actually shifts. The second way is what we consume. So that means what we buy, what we eat, how we get our power. The third is how we get involved. There are so many beautiful projects. And we heard about some of these projects, such as Radhanath Swami's project in India, and others all around the world. Getting involved in these types of projects can really make a difference. And the third is how we use our vote. So we can support leaders who are committed to end fossil fuel subsidies, to invest in renewables, who are committed to leaving fossil fuels in the ground, and to supporting a price on carbon. Through these simple ways, very practical ways in our life, we can make a real difference. There are 300 million yoga practitioners in the world today. If we can all become leaders in this field, we can be a great movement for change. So by listening and observing yoga practitioners around the world who are already doing this, I've been trying to follow in their example.
Thank you, Simon. I think we've pretty much reached the end of the session. It's about 12:33. We've exceeded by 3 minutes. I think we should bring the session to a close before we have somebody knocking on the door. But I would encourage our panelists to kind of mingle with the audience. If some of you could spare time outside the Ecosoc chamber. Again, I would like to express my gratitude profusely to each of our panelists who have taken time today to come and participate in this session. We are eternally grateful for what you've said, and we take back some of your messages, and hopefully we are able to digest them and implement it in our individual way to contribute to the whole. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.